Hey guys, welcome to another RVA Returners deck tech. I am John Snugsy Shriner, and we are going over the Avalanche deck today that I took to second place at the Bahamut Brawl event in Chicago. Avalanche is coming basically in between opuses here, between Opus 14 and 15. We received the Final Fantasy VII two-player Shinra vs. Avalanche starter deck, and immediately I was attracted to the Avalanche Operatives. I think that they have a really neat playstyle. I'm personally not an aggro player at all. I hate playing aggro. I hate throwing all my guys out on the field, turning them sideways, and hoping it works out. But I'll tell you what, for these guys, I don't know, it's something about them. Maybe it's because they're yellow cards that like to party attack, and that hasn't really been a thing that's been successful in Earth before. And maybe it's because it's Final Fantasy VII and I got that soft spot in my heart. I don't know what it is, but I'll tell you what, I am here for Avalanche. So let's go ahead and just jump right into this one. Alright, so we've got Barrett here. Uncle Bobby B himself is the king. He is the legend. He is the box topper from Opus 14. And I'll tell you what, he really was just collecting dust on the shelf up until the starter deck came out. I've got a feeling this starter deck was maybe originally supposed to be out before 14 or with 14, because then it would make a whole lot of sense, right? Like, you pick up the starter deck, hey, why don't you also go pick up a box of the set and you can upgrade your deck. But either way, Barrett was basically forgettable one set ago, and now he is an all-star. So Barrett is the engine that keeps the deck running. He is a dual fire earth card, Avalanche Operative, of course. All these guys are going to be category 7, and his first ability, it almost doesn't matter, but it's if he is dealt damage less than his power, the damage becomes 0 instead. Like, an incredible ability. How could you be saying that this almost doesn't matter? Isn't this like a Minwoo effect? Didn't that used to be some kind of crazy card? You know, hey, look, this is a very powerful effect, but would you believe me if I said it just gets crazier? So both of Barrett's other effects are really where the nutty stuff happens. So Barrett can discard a card from your hand to choose a job Avalanche Operative other than Barrett in your break zone and add it to your hand. You can use this ability once per turn, but again, you can use it on your turn or on the opponent's turn. So you can trade one card every turn for an Avalanche Operative from the discard pile. And why would you want to do that? Well, Barrett says that the job Avalanche Operative forwards other than Barrett that you control gain haste. Well, before this starter deck came out, the only other Avalanche Operatives were, well, forwards named Barrett and one Tifa that came out in the pre-release kit. But now we've got 3 brand new Avalanche Operative forwards from the starter, and they are all we need, baby. They are absolutely going to get us there. So those 3 forwards, of course, are going to be, and I know I didn't like leave all the cards out on the stream last time in the Pirates one, so I'm gonna try that this time. You guys let me know which one you like more. This time, so Biggs is going to be the first Avalanche Operative here. We got Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse, of course. Biggs is if you control a job Avalanche Operative, the cost required to cast Biggs is reduced by 2. That's going to be all 3 of these starter cards. They're all going to be 3-cost Earth cards that have their cost reduced by 2. So very frequently a 1 CP card. And when 2 or more job Avalanche Operative forwards you control form a party and attack, again, that trigger is going to be the same on all 3 of these forwards. They all care about when 2 or more job Avalanche Operative forwards form a party and attack. Biggs lets you draw 1 card and says all forwards in that party gain this forward cannot be broken until the end of the turn. That does mean that if that party is blocked, your opponent cannot use combat damage to break either forward, even though they can put damage on the forward that is higher than their power. They will not break because Biggs says, hey, they can't be broken until the end of the turn. And he draws you a card for his troubles. Between the 3 of them, while Biggs is not the one who can generate the most value all at once, he is certainly the most valuable member of these 3. He gets you that constant card advantage to replace kind of the hand dump we're going to be doing early on in this deck list here. And he also just protects your party, so you can kind of just attack with impunity so that you're always getting all of these triggers off and you're not really worried about the size of your forwards. Next, we're going to talk about Wedge. Wedge here is another of one of the forwards. Of course, 3 on all of these guys. Very important that we're just running maxed out copies of all of the Avalanche Operative forwards because the party attacks are so critical. So what's Wedge do on a party attack? Well, Wedge isn't going to get you the most value all the time, but when he shows up and he makes an impact, it's big. He makes a big splash, let's just say. Wedge has the same things, right? He costs 1 if there's another operative out, and if 2 or more job avalanche operative forwards form a party and attack, you get to choose a dull character of 4 or more opponent controls and break it. So it's dull character, forward or backup, or 4 or more and break it. Now, I see a lot of people play backup Wedge. I get it. Backup Wedge can search out a lot of these other pieces. We're going to talk about searching out the pieces when we get to the backups. But the amount of Avalanche operatives, I wish that there were like 3 more Avalanche operative forwards, just because having any amount of them, they all make Barrett better. They all make every Avalanche operative that has these party triggers better. You just want to be able to create as many parties of 2 Avalanche operatives as possible, right? And the way that it stands, there's 5 Avalanche operatives. So you're only ever going to be able to create 2 parties that include 2 Avalanche operatives. But we want to get to the point where we can start doing those parties as early as possible. And we want to be able to do them, you know, basically, I'm going to say the whole game, although we're going to talk a little bit later about the strategy for this deck. And the strategy for this deck is the polar opposite of our last deck tech video, where we talked about the deck being a slower control variant. This is the fast deck. If you're going to play in a 2-deck format, I highly recommend you play a fast deck and a slower deck. If you play 2 slow decks, you are going to never have enough time to get all your games in, and you're going to burn out really fast. I always, for the 2-deck format, I always played Avalanche first. And if I lost, I ran it back, because you have to win with both decks to move on. So I wanted my Avalanche games to be over ASAP, so I could spend all my time thinking about the Pirates decks. So Wedge is going to be, even though you might think, hey, a dull character 4 or more, that's going to be really good to the mid to late game. Wedge is here to absolutely punish and just snap in half any opponent who tries to set up early and play kind of like a tutor backup, like a 4-cost searcher. And he is absolutely just going to trash any of that kind of ability. Other than that, yeah, sometimes he's just a 1 CP 7k with haste that triggers Biggs and Jesse. But guess what? That's enough. There could be a blank Avalanche operative that was 1 CP, and I'd play it. So speaking of Jesse, Jesse's our other Avalanche operative forward here. Jesse is, again, same thing, reduced by 2, and her party trigger is you can either play a card named Cloud from your hand onto the field, no cost restriction, no element restriction, anything like that, or search your deck for 1 card named Cloud and add it to your hand. So on like a double party thing, it can be like, okay, attack, trigger, search my deck for a Cloud. Okay, on my next attack, I'll add it to my hand. Things that are worth mentioning is all of these guys trigger whenever 2 Avalanche operatives party. They don't have to be in the party. So Jesse sees Biggs and Barrett partying, and she's jealous. Jesse sees Wedge and Biggs party. These guys all see it all. They see it all. They know what's happening. And they're just all here to support each other at all times. So the last Avalanche operative to round out that crew is Tifa. Again, the dual element Tifa from Opus 14. When Tifa enters the field, you may search for a card named Cloud. Oh, we're noticing a pattern. And she also has another ability that you can't forget. Actually, sometimes this one gets in the way. It's an Amaterasuable auto that kills like the weak guy. It's also like the fact that Tifa has increases her power can be relevant if people are playing Diablos and stuff like that. Or sorry, increases other people's power. She doesn't increase herself. But she says when a forward other than Tifa you control attacks, it gains 1,000 power till the end of the turn. Then her third ability, I've never resolved this ability. I mean, I don't really get to damage 6 in Avalanche and not just be losing. But so she does have damage 6 when she enters the field. You may play 1 category 7 character from your hand onto the field. It's, I mean, obviously strong, obviously gravy, but I don't think we need to spend too much time on that ability because it's just good. It's obvious how it's good, and it's rare that it's going to happen. So Tifa creates the 5th Avalanche operative. So one of the reasons she's so important is she's a 2 cost that's going to replace the card, and she's going to get us a Cloud for the Jesse trigger so that we don't have to waste Jesse's first trigger on searching for a Cloud. We can just play one right away. This creates 5 forwards that can attack and 4 different forwards that can be hasted by Barrett. That also gives Barrett 12 cards that he can take out of the discard pile, trade any other card in your deck for one of these critical cards, and it's going to make sure that you're always re-presenting. The next turn, you're going to present those party attacks again. Then the next turn, you're going to present them again. They have to deal with Barrett, and then they got to clean up the operatives. If they just clean up the operatives, Barrett just goes around and he recruits and he gets them all back. So to round out our forwards, there's only going to be 2 non-Final Fantasy VII forwards. We're going to go over them last. But the next 8 cards that we're going to talk about are all the same character. And, well, wouldn't you know it, it's Cloud. So yes, I like to talk about the Cloud count when we talk about Avalanche. And my Cloud count is 8. I think that we need to have at least 8 clouds. You're just searching so many clouds. I think some people play higher counts, and I could see that. You know what? I might be convinced to go to 9 clouds. You just want to constantly be getting all the card advantage that Tifa and Jessie can provide you. You will be triggering that many attacks that you will go through clouds and all of a sudden be like, wait, I can't search any more clouds? I'm only drawing a free card with my biggest party attack? I know, it sounds crazy. But yeah, so 3 clouds. This Cloud is nuts. He's also from the starter deck. When Cloud enters the field, if you control an Avalanche Operative forward, that's important. Make sure you control an Avalanche Operative, and make sure you control Avalanche Operatives that they can't just kill. Just Tifa can be really dangerous if they burn Hilda or her in response. That's a huge blowout. So remember that. And also Fran on Tifa or something like that. But yeah, when Cloud enters the field, you can select up to 2 of the 3 following actions. Choose a forward, deal it 10,000 damage, choose an Avalanche Operative or 4 or less in the break zone. All of these cards, 15 cards, and play it onto the field. And you can also choose all the forwards you control gain haste until the end of the turn. I will say that oftentimes the gain haste on all forwards is going to be you're applying it to Barrett and Cloud, because Barrett probably came out that turn, you jammed the other operatives out, you partied with 2 of the operatives, Cloud comes in, and Cloud is either going to remove a problem if there's one in the way, and if there's not, he's going to haste the board and play insert Avalanche Operative here. You're almost always going to opt to play an operative if there's one missing, because it's just so important, again, to have those multiple operative party attacks. But this is the Cloud that you want to cast. You want to play this Cloud as many times as possible. All of the other clouds are CP, and sometimes we cast them, or sometimes they have effects that are nice. I'm going to talk about this next one really fast because I have a mistake here. So I actually showed up without a 3rd legal full art Cloud to the tournament, where there would be 3 of this 5-drop red Cloud in the deck, and only 1 of this Cloud. So instead I'm at 2 and 2. So let's talk about the red Cloud for a second. This is a box topper from Opus 8. This Legend Cloud used to be all the rage. This was when Fire first started getting good. After so many sets of people saying, you know, Fire is the worst element. Fire is a meme. Why would I ever play Fire? I know it's kind of funny to think about that these days, right? This Cloud, he's a little bit past his prime. We don't really want to cast him, but he is red. And it turns out that red is really important because you're going to notice that there's cards in this deck that are red and yellow, but really, ideally, we kind of just want to play a mono earth deck. Because each of these operatives has the potential to just cost 1 earth CP, each single earth CP we can create is so much more valuable than an individual fire CP. In fact, we almost never want 1 fire CP, only if we're casting Tifa. And honestly, I'll cast Tifa a lot of times by tapping 1 earth backup and pitching a fire card from hand. Just because Tifa replaces that card too, so it's really not that bad. We want as many earth backups. If I could play all earth backups and it would just be perfect and never a problem, I would. We do play 2 fire backups, and by that I mean literally 2 copies. Like there's a single fire backup of 2 separate backups in the deck, but they both have a pretty big impact, so we will talk about them in just a little bit. But yeah, this Cloud, he's got an EX and he's red, so almost any time if I'm sitting pretty and I'm just refilling my hand and I'm using a Jessie trigger, I'm going to grab red Clouds so that I can pay for Amaterasu and pay for other fire cards. There's 2 of this Cloud. I will say this Cloud's pretty good against ice. But a lot of times against ice matchups, you're not in a position where like you have to worry about the mid game, which is what this guy does. Again, he's just more CP. He's pitchable, but he's not super bad. Obviously, if you're gonna play Clouds that are mostly just CP targets, you want them to be the right color to pitch for CP, and also not absolutely horrible if you get stuck with them. So these guys aren't bad to play for free. Now, and then we've got 1 of this Cloud. Now, yeah, this guy might be surprising you. This is an Opus 8 starter Cloud. Yeah, there was 1 of those. When he enters the field, you choose a forward, and if you control 4 or more 7 forwards, you just break it. His second ability is like when a 7 forward blocks, it gains 1,000 power to the end of the turn. Ignore that. This guy is here to just be like oh, by the way, sometimes I could just go tutor a guy that I can play for free off my next party attack, and it's just going to break your blocker. Again, if this should be a third one of these, and then I was at 1-1 on these. I will talk about the light dark slot in a little bit. There was a while where I was on 1 light cloud instead of this guy. Just because the light cloud can search like 90% of the deck and would always make my worst start not so bad. But turns out we don't have really bad starts anymore, so we don't really need him. But yeah, so those are all the clouds. These are all the 7 characters. So for the non-7 forwards, we have 2 copies of this Terra. Terra, of course, EX Burst. She gets a summon back from the discard pile. When you cast a summon, she adds an extra 2k to it. That'll be a little bit relevant for one of the summons we're going to talk about in a bit, but mostly you will start to notice, now that we've moved past these forwards, that the Avalanche deck is what I like to call a 20 slot deck, right? 30 of the spots are pretty much spoken for you, and whatever you want, you can do with the other 20 spots. In Avalanche, we had this testing period where it came out alongside Ice Lightning. Ice Lightning is a deck that a lot of players like to play. It's really good at stealing games. It can be really sneaky. It can seem like you're going to win, and then all of a sudden Ice Lightning taps 3 guys, plays a guy with haste, and you lose. This deck actually had a pretty hard time with Ice Lightning, which is fair because, that was the other deck in the starter. And Chris Adams, of course, shout out to Chris of the RVA Returners. Chris got a little frustrated about losing to it, and he goes, all right, I'm just going to take this into the shop, and I'm going to burst it up. And Chris takes the list, and he turns it into like a 30 EX burst Avalanche list. And I'll tell you what, we immediately stopped losing to other aggressive decks, to Ice Lightnings especially. It was also wound up being really good in the mirror. It also just wound up, like, some of the bursts, some of the removal started to really show its value to us as we realized the game plan for this deck. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit before we get to the rest of the backups and summons and stuff like that. But the game plan with this deck is very much, you're on a bombing mission. That's what the name of the deck is, right? You're going to try to get in there, blow it up, and get out before anybody realizes what you're doing. If you try to get in there and hang around and play a long game, that's when Shinra's going to show up and you're going to be in trouble. The Avalanche deck, this list specifically, is designed to absolutely pop off on turn 2, maybe 3, and you're trying to win the game by like 3 or 4. Sometimes, obviously, games go a little bit longer than that, but everything about this deck is tuned to have a really explosive start, to move obstacles out of the way to maximize that start, and the worst case scenario, to prepare yourself for a second burst or a second bombing run, okay? So, Terra is an EX that's going to get us back a summon that's either going to remove an obstacle for us or protect what we currently have in play. So she really helps us with the all-in type of mentality once we get past a certain point, aka using too many Amaterasus, etc. She's flexible. You could play something else in her position. I just really like having more access to some of those critical summons. Like, I wish I could play 4 or 5 Amaterasus, so instead I'll play 3 Amaterasus and 2 Terras, you know what I'm saying? The last forward is 1 Noctis. Now, this could be a lot of different light or dark cards. A lot of people like playing Light Aerith. I don't think that's wrong. Light Aerith, especially if you're going to do some Cloud Pod stuff, is interesting. She comes down, she just puts 2 Final Fantasy VII cards back in your hand. Again, that's most of these. The thing is, that's about it. That's what she does. If you're playing her in a Cloud Pod list, she kind of gets a little further than that because you can turn her into a 5-drop. But I'm looking for something that that does what the deck is trying to do, right? We're trying to put that pressure on. We're trying to have get all of our value back out of our party attacks, and we're trying to be party attacking as early and often as possible. So I slapped 1 Noctis in here. Noctis is a card that I literally did not draw him in all of my Avalanche games until top 4. And when I played him in top 4, he really helped me out. But the thing is, he just felt so extra. I've never liked any light or dark slot in this deck, but I keep trying different ones out. Again, the Aerith feels fine. Noctis feels fine. Cloud felt fine. Kadaj is even one I've tried, because Kadaj can dull one of their characters, and then Wedge can shoot the dull character. It's a really cool way it's pretty much the only way to synergize with Wedge and color. But you know what wound up making me angrier than any of those things? is drawing a lighter dark card and then having to play it when I really just wanted to go on a bombing mission. So yeah, the Barrett exists to be able to trade those cards out for a non-lighter dark card. But honestly, I wound up playing the Noctis because in the worst case scenario, all I have to do is pitch a card to play Noctis. He's a 2-cost lighter dark card. So it kind of minimizes the thing I like the least about them. You could try switching this to any lighter dark card. I'm not locked in on this in any particular way. Like, this is negotiable. What these are is negotiable. But 8 clouds and these Avalanche Operative forwards exactly this way, in my opinion, non-negotiable for this deck. So those are the forwards. Let's clean these guys up, and we will move over to backups. Zoop to the hideout with you. Okay. Hey, what are you doing? Focus up. Focus up, camera. Camera. Okay. To the backups. So I told you that we have 1 copy of 2 different fire backups, and it's going to be Meath and Zangan. So we'll talk about these guys real quick. There's 1 of each of these. So Meath, when Meath enters the field, discard a card. If you do so, search for 1 forward at the same cost of the discarded card and add it to your hand. Real quick before we talk about the real things that this is good for, Meath is the exact reason, it's another reason that I like running 2 Terras. It's one of the reasons I put a second one of this cloud in instead of another one of this cloud when I couldn't get the 5-drop. And it's also actually the reason that we play one of this cloud. So these 4 drops can become Barrett, which is important. And then the real reason that we're running Meath is that all these lovely Avalanche Operatives are 3 cost. So because Barrett can get you Avalanche Operatives out of your discard pile, you want to be playing Meath right away and just pitching an Avalanche Operative to go get another different unique Avalanche Operative, just so that you have access to more of them early. And you know, in the case that you have more than 1 Operative, you go get your Barrett. But Meath basically helps you turn whatever piece of the combo or whatever piece of an explosive turn 2 isn't in your opening hand, he'll get you there. Zangan searches for Tifa. Again, Tifa is going to help you get a cloud. Because Zangan starts this crazy search chain where Zangan gets Tifa, Tifa gets cloud, and cloud plays an Avalanche Operative onto the field from the discard. I'm convinced to keep 1 in here. He also does give Tifa haste by himself, so there's a little redundancy there. What I will say, though, is you never need both of these. So there were 2 games where I drew them both, and I just pitched this guy for this guy, right? I mean, you could do it the other way, too, if you need the CP, especially if you don't have a Tifa in hand. But, yeah, I just pitched 1 for the other one, because you don't need all that. I will say also with the Tifa is very valuable as both colors of CP. Always remember that you can trade a card with Barrett. Sorry, I'll leave them up here. Always remember that you can trade a card with Barrett to change something into the right color CP. That's very important. Alright, so for these next ones, people who play Avalanche Operatives, especially people who looked at the Japanese list, probably going to give me a really hard time. But again, remember guys, I'm trying to play a much faster game, I think, than a lot of other Avalanche lists. I'm not trying to go to this late, long game. I'm not trying to play a backup that searches a backup like Claris into Edgar. I'm not trying to do all that stuff. We just want to get the pieces and go. So we've got 1 Kolka and 1 Vigali. So Kolka, of course, he searches for an Earth forward, adds it to your hand. Vigali searches for a multi-element card and adds it to your hand. Vigali, I know that people are like probably on 2 or 3 of both of these in a lot of Avalanche lists. They don't have the next guy I'm going to show, so it makes a little bit more sense to me. But really, so we only play 10 backups in this list that aren't kill spell type backups, because we're not trying to build past 3 backups ever, right? And honestly, a lot of times we pop off of 1 or 2. So these guys can help you get Barrett. Vigali gets Tifa, Barrett, or Cloud, and all 3 of them are critical. So Vigali is just a really, really important piece. I think most people understand how strong that card is, of course. Then Kolka is going to search for any Earth forward, so he can get us all 3 of those, as well as the extra Avalanche Operatives. Why 1 of each? I don't ever want to be in a position where I can't play this because I drew the second one or something like that. Like, I'd rather have 2 different unique ways. Instead of just 2 Kolka or 2 Vigali, I want 2 different ways to search for 2 different pieces. Because having the different pieces is what's so important. If you have 3 Bigs and 2 Barretts in your hand, you're not going to have a good time. You want to have multiple different Avalanche Operatives. Marlene is going to be the next card here. Marlene is, again, she just is a way to get Barrett back. Out of all of the cards in our deck, we're going to have 3, 4, what? We have 5 backups that search Barrett out of the deck. We have 3 backups that get him out of our discard pile, and then we have 3 clouds that also play him out of the discard pile. So we're trying to make sure we always have Barrett, because if we have Barrett, Barrett gets us all the rest of the pieces. Tiro. People are not playing Tiros in their Avalanche lists, and it drives me nuts. I understand the idea. You're a little worried about something like a wedge, right? If you play Tiro against me, I'm going to be pretty happy. Well, you kind of have that information. Also, again, this deck is going so fast, so early, that, yeah, maybe you just, you know, take that chance. You just try and get there. I've played turn 1 Tiros in this deck a lot over the weekend. Turn 1 Tiro I actually like better than having to play one of these turn 1. I know, isn't that so weird? Well, he gets your fire online, and remember what we keep saying about fire backups is, like, I don't want to play, like, if I could just not play these, if I could never draw these, drawing Meath is good sometimes, but, like, if instead I could always draw an earth backup, but I also never ever had fire CP problems, then I'd be happy. Unfortunately, the fire CP problems do come up, and if you're going to want to generate fire CP and you're going to want to have as many individual earth backups available as possible, well, that's where the Tiros come in. They are really helpful at being whatever you need, but he's also EX. Go get yourself an Avalanche Operative. So, like, again, look at this. Remember what we talked about the losing to the aggressive matchups? Another thing about Avalanche is if you go all in on that early turn and they reset the board, you need to be able to build one more crazy all-in turn. And in order to be able to build one more of those turns, you're going to need to get all the pieces back. Well, a lot of the EXs of the deck are just going to help you get back those pieces. Marlene's going to get a piece out of the discard pile. And she can either get Cloud, Barrett, or Tifa, and all 3 of those gets you to a second piece, right? So she gets 2 pieces for you. Tiro gets whatever you're missing out of the deck. I mean, just such an incredible EX. Zangan is going to go get you Tifa if you're missing her. And that's it. These are the 10 that we were talking about. These are the 10 backups that can search for a card from our deck. The rest of our backups are going to blow things up. So people don't really play a lot of blow things up backups. And the reason that they don't is because you're trying to set up, and a blow thing up backup isn't good when you're setting up. A blow thing up backup is only good when you're cruising along trying to win the game and your opponent's presenting forwards and you still have backup slots. A lot of decks that like to build backups would rather get to 5 and not get rid of any of them. They don't want to, like, leave a spot open or anything like that. Also, Avalanche is one of the very few Earth decks where you almost always have more forwards out than you have backups out. And that's where some of the tech pieces here come into play. So we've got 1 Raubon EX. Raubon was something that Chris had gone up to 3 of in the super heavy EX version where we just wanted to blow up all our opponent's guys on damage. And I cut it back down to 1 because I couldn't cut it to 0. It was just so good in so many little ways. The fact that the Barrett is a 9k, and Raubon's only a 1-way, so there's no fight happening, means that Barrett can kill 9k problems with Raubon completely safely, and for the next turn, hey, look what he is. He's an Earth backup. So after the Raubon, he's going to be able to help us refuel that big turn by playing another Avalanche Operative. So basically, I look at all of these Earth kill spell backups as kill a guy and then pay for my Operative next turn. So it really kind of helps with the game plan. But yeah, Barrett into Tenzin, Barrett into Susano, if they just did that reset, right? Barrett into... what were we talking about earlier? Leviathan, Bismarck, that's the other one. So he can just point at these guys and he can just say, no, you're done. Speaking of pointing at guys and saying, now you're done with 4-cost EX Burst Earth backups. Here's one I bet you didn't expect to see. Sid Mobius. Now, I'll tell you what, dude. Chris put 3 of these in the EX Burst deck, and I was like, what does that card even do? I had to reread it. It's rare I have to reread a card. And I looked at this and thought, okay, you know what? One of the things that was holding this card back is the fact that, like I said, you usually have more backups than forwards. You're trying to build your backups first and then play your forwards. Since Avalanche is in this really unique spot where you'll have like 3 to 4 forwards off of 1 or 2 backups, Sid Mobius is almost always like a 12k plus. I mean, even just with 2 forwards, he comes down for an 8k. I removed a lot of pesky blockers with Sid Mobius's over the weekend. And if all of your guys are sideways, right, like all of your Avalanche operatives, they just came in on the bombing mission you just attacked, and your opponent dares attack you, Raubon and Sid Mobius are certain to punish them for that. So trust me, I would not have tried this either. I totally get all of you naysayers. People looking at this are probably going, what the hell? Try it. Trust me. You're going to fall in love with it just like I did when I tried it, when Chris put it in the deck. All right, the next two are here to kind of clean up, again, problem blockers. We've got Prompto. If the field's starting to get a little wide, if they start to do twin stuff on you, maybe Pirates has gotten a couple guys out, maybe you're playing the mirror. Well, don't worry, Prompto's going to clean that up for you. He's going to go ahead, he's going to take the most important guy, and he's going to remove him from the game. He's going to kill the other forward, and guess what he is the turn after you play him? He taps for Earth CP for an Avalanche operative, just like Sid Mobius, just like Raubon. So again, Prompto, and we might as well just go over her at the same time. Shantoto, again, Shantoto, not ideal. Sometimes your opponent is going to pop up before you get a chance to, so you'll do that instead. Shantoto is kind of like an emergency button. You just feel better having one around. Honestly, you could probably lose the Shantoto, but one of the reasons I chose to keep her is also because, like we talked about with Tiro, and the value of an Earth backup that can fix that fire tap for you, had me keep her around, and I don't hate it. It's nice to know you have one in there for when things start to get really out of hand. You still technically have an out. And speaking of your opponent having an out, let's move over to our summons, because we don't want our opponents to have outs. And that's why we play 3 Amaterasus and 2 Terras. Of course, Amaterasu, it doesn't really need me to go over it. Cancels auto abilities, stops the board wipe, so they're going to reset the board. That's going to get your opponent back in the game. So you've got a board of Barrett, Biggs, Wedge, Jesse, Cloud. Your opponent tries to Shantoto it. You go, nah, that's all right. The nice thing about this deck is, for being a crazy aggro deck like it is, hey, right when we opened the video, I said I don't like the aggro decks. Well, the reason that I like this one is because as you're attacking, you're just getting all of this value back. So remember that board we talked about earlier. I mean, and this is a very realistic board. By the 3rd turn, you're usually doing like the double Avalanche Operative Party attack, unless your opponent has, you know, stopped something about it. And a double Avalanche Operative Party attack, you're going to go draw 2 cards and search for 2 cards. So, like, just think about how much you're refilling your hand after you just dumped everything onto the table. Barrett makes sure that you keep getting the right colors and you're getting the right pieces if they're getting removed from the field. So this is why I like to play the red clouds. It's why I would go up to a 1/3 of the 5 CP EX cloud. I mean, that's what I play on my normal list. It's just not what I played at this event. Because what you're going to be doing with all those cards post, like, slamming everything on the field and doing all those party attacks, is you're really just looking to draw into some of your safety summons. So there's 3 different kinds of safety summons, I'll say, in this deck. Amaterasu obviously is a big one. Amaterasu stops board wipes, and, you know, I mean, that's basically it, but he stops board wipes and your opponent getting efficient plays to catch them back up into the game. We have Titan. He's another one of the safety summons here. Yeah, I know, right? Big honkin' 5 CP EX burst Titan. Do you ever want to catch this guy? Well, not really, but guess what? You're going to start to find that you have an awful lot of expendable income when it comes to CP once you start doing the party attacks. Titan just being able to pump your Barrett up to an absurd number so that he can clear literally anybody in the game off the field, pretty big. It's also a one-way attack. I've used this to great effect. Just a lot of times where the opponent kind of thinks, all right, I've got just enough guys, I can block this attack, I can just hang on. Boom, big Titan rips his shirt off and pops him one in the mouth. Also, again, another EX. You'll notice that there's an awful lot of EXs getting added to the deck once we get past the Final Fantasy VII cards. And that these EXs are there, again, to just make sure that if somebody is going in my face, like I'm getting in their face, I'm able to kind of stall the game out long enough to get Barrett down, to get another bombing mission together, and hit the next sector's reactor. Last things here on the list. Oh man, look at me. I wasn't even good about scooting over to Titan. All right, Brynhildr. Honestly, this last summon I'm about to show you could probably be a 3rd Brynhildr. I just like this last summon too much. I've been cheeky with it over the years in a lot of different decks. And I've been having a little bit of fun with it. But this should probably just be a 3rd Brynhildr if you're not crazy like me, and you want to just play a good deck. 3 Brynhildr. Brynhildr is choose a forward, deal at 5,000 damage. When it is put from the field into the break zone this turn, draw 1 card. The Penelo Slayer, also really good at killing your opponent's Tifa. Brynhildr is just a really efficient card. If you get that card draw off of it, it's pretty nuts that it kills something and gets you to draw. More than one time, I would attack with this cloud. Your opponent tries to chump this cloud instead of block it with a big guy who can clearly kill it. Like, you attack with this cloud into a 9k, right? because you just want to play another one on your party attack with Jesse and play and just 10k another guy and give him haste, or 10k a guy and play another Avalanche Operative. Since playing the clouds is free, having the clouds on your board is actually really annoying. So you're going to attack with this guy. You're either going to deal a free pointed damage, or you're going to, you know, they'll trade and you can play the next one. So sometimes what they try to do to get out of this is they chump block him, right? So they'll chump cloud for like 5 or 6k. Well, that's where the old Brynhildr comes in. You just, I blocked with my cloud, and then I Brynhildr my own cloud, draw a card, and then I party attack and play another cloud. I did that like 2 or 3 times that weekend. Pretty cool. So just remember, he can target your own forwards. Same thing if they're trying to do something to your Tifa. Like somebody tried to Brynhildr my Tifa, and I just Brynhildr'd her instead. So then I get to draw the card. Pretty funny. But yeah, so those are the summons. Oh yeah, sorry, we've got Cloud is not the last summon. The last summon is 1 copy of 2CP Titan. This card's been around since Opus 1. I love this card. This card really is going to ruin somebody's day. They're going to finally have what they need to crack your Barrett. Or actually what I used this against a couple times was they go to Shinryu, and I'll just use Titan to save one of the Avalanche Operatives, because then on their turn, like Shinryu doesn't kill Barrett, so they clear all 3 operatives. I Titan one of the operatives. I use Barrett to get a second operative on their turn, and then when it's on my turn, I just Barrett the 3rd one back. But basically, Barrett is such an important piece. As long as Barrett's on the board, the bombing mission is go. There is no Avalanche without Barrett. So Titan's just there to kind of make sure he sticks around for one more mission. But again, like I said, could just be a 3rd Brynhildr. But that's Avalanche Operatives, guys. I will say about this deck is don't play it slow. Put your foot on the gas. You're trying to bomb the reactor, get out of there, and get home to Marlene and to that nice drink that Tifa's made for you. You know, we're not trying to hang around. We're not trying to get caught by Shinra. We're not trying to start a whole mess. Be aggressive with it. Don't be afraid to just get a big party attack going on the 2nd turn. Remember that there is a lot that they have to do to actually stop the party attacks. Short of removing Barrett with something like a Typhon or an Alexander or that 4CP Bahamut, they're going to have a really hard time actually removing the Avalanche Operatives, because Barrett's going to be able to keep cycling them back into hand. So I think this deck is, I mean, what the most expensive cards to upgrade this deck are probably, you get a couple $5 Barretts, and what's Amaterasu up to right now? I don't know. He's got to be the most expensive card in there. And honestly, Ama isn't even necessary, but I will say, because you're going all in early, Amaterasu is what makes it a little bit less YOLO and a little bit more of a like a real deck. But yeah, try Avalanche Operatives out. You can pretty much just pick up the starter and buff it up from there for pretty cheap. And this deck is very powerful, very fast, and if people underestimate it, it's going to get them. But that's it for us, guys. That's the end of the deck tech on the Avalanche deck that I took to Bahamut Brawl. Again, this one, I did a slightly different format than the first video, but both of these just kind of quickie, no video editing or anything like that on my end. So if this worked out for you and you liked it, let me know. Put in the comments if you'd like to see us do more deck tech videos like this in the future. I know it's been a hot minute since the Returners have put out any kind of this kind of content. And just to plug our other stuff, please, if you haven't gotten a chance, listen to the RVA Returners podcast. You can find us on soundcloud.com/RVA Returners, also Google Play, iTunes, all that jazz. We also have tournaments, free weekly tournaments every Wednesday night at 7 o'clock, and we stream them live on twitch.tv/RVA Snugsy. You can also go to that link to get access to the Discord, where we post those events and those all the news and stuff there. So just tune in for that. But until next time, guys, thank you so much. Everybody who reached out interested in these decks, thank you. I'm sorry it took me a little bit of time to get these videos out, but Elden Ring is really good and really long. So until next time, guys, take care.